Hi everybody, it's Amy here, and I'm very excited for the book we'll be discussing today. It's exciting for me to discuss it because in some ways it's quite a radical view on life and productivity. Considering we are talking about self-development, we often read books about how to do more, how to build habits, but as you can see by the title of this book, Do Nothing, and depending on the culture and the upbringing of a specific person, doing nothing is usually associated with laziness. In fact, it's associated with one of the 7 deadly sins, being sloth. However, the author criticizes how our society has geared itself towards a never-ending, always improving 24-hour state of productivity. Whilst productivity is not a bad thing, many of us have lost the balance between work, sleep, relaxation, socialization, and play. The author does not advocate for staying in bed all day and accomplishing absolutely nothing, but she does suggest that we have a toxic culture whereby, especially with the growth of technology, we struggle to separate our work and social life. This tendency leads towards burnout, whereby people work too hard, do not sleep or eat enough or in the way that they should, and their bodies end up giving in some way, which ironically would make the person need to take sick leave or time off work, which is what they were trying to avoid in the first place. The author of Do Nothing is Celeste Headley. She's a radio journalist, public speaker, and co-host of the weekly Retro Report. I'd like to open up with a quote from the author. We judge our days based on how efficient they are, not on how fulfilling. Improvement is healthy, but not every moment of your day should be leveraged in an attempt to make you a better person. To understand this fully, let's discuss these two words, efficient and fulfilling. There's a delicate balance here because the author is saying that improvement is good, but that you do not have to donate every minute of every day to improving yourself or being efficient. If you want to read a fictional novel for some time during the day that's not related to self-improvement or efficiency, that's okay. The author goes on to say that it's not the emphasis on hard work that's toxic, but the obsession with it. We now live in a culture in which we're not happy being or being fulfilled and only satisfied when we're doing or being efficient. I think a big part of this obsession with hard work is comparison. For example, you may think you're working hard and you're producing results, but then you might see or hear that someone else wakes up at 5 a.m., a whole half an hour earlier than you, and suddenly you feel like you need to start doing that too. Let's talk more about how our work life has possibly overtaken our whole life. Would you say that you have a good work-life balance? This is a really good question that you can journal with yourself. Would you say that you have a good work-life balance? In other words, do you balance working with resting and spending time with family or friends? A subtle way that work life has invaded our personal life is through values. The author explains this by saying somehow the same characteristics used to describe a good employee came to also describe a good husband or sister or friend. Words and values such as reliable, stable, hardworking, independent. This is interesting because it suggests that being a good worker means that you're a good person, and being a good person depends on you being a good worker. It also alludes to the thought that how you are at work and the work that you produce can affect your value as a person even when you leave work. Therefore, if you're less hardworking than the person who sits next to you, you may consider yourself as less valuable as a person. While I don't think that these values or traits are bad, the ones that we listed above, such as being reliable or independent, I definitely agree that you should remind yourself that you are valuable as you are outside of your work and separately from it. This type of toxic work culture, or even just addiction to productivity, extends even further. it makes its way into our relationships. The author explains this phenomenon by saying more and more we're investing in horizontal relationships. In other words, more widespread and superficial rather than vertical, more focused and in depth. And we may simply be overwhelmed by too many superficial connections. To explain this further, many people in today's society focus more on having a lot of friends. This can be seen in the world of social media because people are wanting more and more followers. They're looking for friendships that are widespread, but the odds of them even knowing every one of their followers, and much less knowing them on a deep level, are slim. Maybe you cannot relate to this, but it sometimes feels like you're doing something wrong if you don't have a huge amount of friends who are always inviting you places and keeping you company. The author flips the script by suggesting that the depth you find in relationships and friendships is more important than how many relationships or friendships you have. Humans have always been very good at creating things and being innovative. A way that this was done was by inventing and using tools. They started off very simple and mundane, but as time passed, tools have become more and more sophisticated. The author gives an interesting critique on the concept of tools when she said, most of the time we use tools to accomplish specific tasks over limited periods of time. But that's not how we use our smartphones, which is a more sophisticated tool that we have created over time. With our phones, the task is never complete and so the tool is never put away. This is a very interesting concept because cell phones are very much tools and they are excellent. They make our lives more efficient and keep us connected. But you could ask yourself this question, and it's another opportunity to journal. How often do you take a break from your phone and how does it make you feel? Between our cell phone and the various other tools that we have available, our attention is nearly always divided because we seem to always be working on something. Our hobbies have become goals, our homes have become offices, and our free time is not free. I find this strikingly true because I often catch myself enjoying a hobby and wondering how I could make this hobby more productive. When talking about doing nothing or relaxing, a useful thing to do is understand the difference between spare time and leisure time because they are often used interchangeably. The author says that what we call spare time are the minutes and hours we find in between the work we do. It's inextricably tied to work and it's meant to recharge our batteries so we can get back to work feeling refreshed. However, because it's so close to our work, for example, the 10 minutes before your next meeting, you don't actually feel recharged. You may just have had some time to drink water or have a snack, but the spare time you find in between working is seldom calming or fully rejuvenating. The author juxtaposes this with leisure time by saying that leisure, on the other hand, is separate from work. It should be unpolluted by work, meaning that you don't check your work devices or apps. Leisure time should not be the same as your spare time. It's time for you and not for your work. The author also found a growing body of evidence suggesting that quality leisure time, meaning leisure time that's truly disengaged from work concerns, will ultimately make you better and more satisfied with your job. So not only does it have a positive impact for you and the people around you, but ultimately your job too. Many people may say that they do not have the time for leisure because they're too busy. There are too many work appointments and things that fill up the schedule, and people often feel too overwhelmed to relax. The author has a remedy for this. She says begin by keeping a diary and tracking your activities. Be honest, if you spend a half hour on Twitter, note that down. If you discover that you spend 20 minutes looking at shoes online, write that down too. It's important that while you're doing this activity, you don't judge yourself for online shopping or spending a lot of time on social media, whatever the case may be. The more honest and open you can be, the more effective the exercise will be for you. She goes on to say that once you have a clear idea of how much you're working with, how many hours are devoted to social media, and how much time you spend on leisure, you can begin to ask yourself some important questions. For example, how much time do I want to spend cooking dinner? How much time do I want to spend on social media or on your emails? How much time do you want to spend exercising? Use the answers to these questions to create guidelines for yourself. This is quite an empowering exercise because we often have more control over our time than we realize. In our current culture, what we would call hustling is fairly addictive. Some people may feel like they need productivity or that they need to constantly feel under pressure to feel whole. The author shares an updated list of human needs posited by the neuroscientist Nicole Gravagna. I urge you to focus on how beautifully simple this list is. It consists of food, water, shelter, sleep, human connection, and novelty. Obviously, you may need to work to be able to afford food or shelter, but when you get down to these core needs, life feels very simple. This is expanded on by looking at the idol theory. According to the idol theory, the entities that meet their survival needs with the least amount of work are most likely to survive. In other words, these people who are able to meet their needs of getting enough food, water, shelter, sleep, human connection, and novelty without overindulging or working themselves too much have a greater chance of living longer. And I would argue that they have a greater chance of living happier because, in my opinion, happiness is found in the smallest of things. Chris Davis, one of the original proponents of this idol theory, calls it survival of the idolist. I suspect that you have a good understanding of all those fundamental needs, but one that could be slightly tricky is novelty. Novelty refers to something new or original or unusual. This does not mean you have to buy anything new to have your needs met. You could change the path that you take on your walk to work. You could go out for dinner one night during the week if that's not part of your usual routine. The point of novelty is that you do something different every now and then to keep you excited and inspired. A quote that I really enjoyed from this book was, "Remember that we're not biologically and evolutionarily born to work. We are, however, designed to relate with other people and form intimate bonds with friends and family. This does not mean that I hate working and that everyone should quit their jobs. I think there's great joy to be found in the work that you do. However, I think this book is reminding us not to make our jobs our whole identity, so that if we do not make a target or reach a certain work-related goal, we don't feel that we have failed as a person." I really enjoyed this book because it was counter to popular culture. It had some interesting historical background that is explained and went as far back as the Industrial Revolution and how this changed the way people worked and lived. If you're not convinced that there's happiness to be found in relaxation and idleness, test yourself and read the book. It's well written and it really puts things into perspective, and it teaches you to take a break when you need to enjoy the simple things in life, and to really focus on connecting with the people around you. Thank you so much for listening. Please leave any thoughts or questions or comments down below.